Hi everyone, welcome back to Room and Board. My name is Chris George, and today we are going through Mechanics 60 to 51 in us counting down the best board game mechanics and mechanisms of all time. The best according to past me when I did this whole ranking process. We've come back to it. I've had people screaming from the rooftops. Literally every rooftop I go by, I hear someone screaming, "Please, when will Room and Board get back? We need to know his top 60 mechanics." And so I figured I'd return to the series finally. I was talked about it last a little bit in the summer, but we're back to it now because I think this is fun. I think this is a really fun series, and it's only going to get more fun for me as we continue to go up the rankings on what I personally look for and enjoy in a board game. But I think it's, one, applicable to everyone because my list is obviously your list, because otherwise why would you be on this channel? And two, I love looking at games in this way, sort of on the Board Game Geek terminology ranking, because these sorts of things not only help us categorize what we like, but get us a little bit more informed and can help us make more informed future purchases as well. We can say, yeah, I really like all these games, and wow, they have this one specific thing in common. Maybe that is the thread that makes me enjoy it. So if you see something coming out, I cover a lot of Kickstarters. Well, I cover every Kickstarter, not an exaggeration. When you see games coming out, you can say, bam, I love that mechanic. Now I can take note, because there's a lot of stuff out there, and there are lots and lots of games always coming out. And isolating what we like about games helps us hone in or maybe get trapped by a newer thing. So let's get right into it. We're going from 60 to 51 in this video. And starting off with number 60, we have the speed matching mechanic. And I agree with past Chris. I think I won't agree with past Chris on some of these choices as my tastes have even shifted and I've become a better consumer and I've become more focused on what I like, or perhaps have gotten tired of seeing the same thing over and over. But speed matching, I think, is exactly where it should be. Maybe it could be a bit higher. Speed matching is very simple. Something is flipped up and you have to be the first person to see if a match exists. So Ghost Blitz is an example of this. Spot It is an example of this. Set is an example of this. It's a quick speed element where you have to quickly identify Beautiful Mind, cue the Beautiful Mind overlay, identify what patterns are out there and be the first person to identify it. And so that's different from a speed action game as well. Anomia is another one of these. Dutch Blitz is the reason why this is so high up on the list. Having to quickly assess the information that is out there and then be dexterous in how you slap things or move cards around or whatever. I just think it's a friggin' blast, and there's really not so much more to say about it. If a game has speed matching, likely that is all the game has. I don't think you'll see many Euro games which will involve a speed matching mechanic. Although that's maybe what Pendulum was trying to do with a real-time game. I haven't played Pendulum, so I don't know. Anyway, that's speed matching. That's my number 60. I'm just thinking about Dutch Blitz now, and that's getting me fired up for this video anyways. Let's move on to number 59, which is a mechanic that you've probably heard a lot, and that is the pick up and deliver mechanic. And again, I'm happy where this one is falling. It is, as the name suggests, you're going to pick up something, it's somewhere on the board, and then you're going to run to another part of the board and you're going to deliver that thing. There are a lot of games that employ this. Probably one of my favorite would be Istanbul. You're running around, you're getting some goods in one place, and then you're going to another place and spending those goods for various things. You're getting money in one place and then you're spending that money in a different spot. Other games that Board Game Geek has listed under this are Clank Legacy, Acquisitions Incorporated, that's the first one, Pandemic Season 2. I haven't played that one. Age of Steam, Zaya, Legends of a Drift System, Horrified, which was another one that came to mind. You're picking up a random citizen. It doesn't have to be a resource. It can be a citizen that you're picking up on your back, or you're escorting to a specific location, and they go, "Thank you. Here's your beautiful heart." I feel like a lot of open world games have this as well, to instill that open world. Yes, I went to the saloon and I'm gonna go drop those off to the mare owner. You know, that famous mare owner that lives miles and miles away from the saloon? Yes, I have to give them whatever I picked up at the saloon, probably alcohol, but why are you giving it to the mare owner for their horses? Because their horses are finally retiring and they wanted to throw them a big bash. And how else are you going to do that in Western town than dicking their face in a bucket of vodka? No, don't do that to your horses. I take it back. I will not be completing this quest. Yeah, pick up and deliver is sort of like one of those standard mechanisms, one of those standard things where I can see how they're always integral to the game and integral to the working of the game, and I think it's that respect for the mechanic that's made it higher on my list, but it's not something that I am going to be very excited about. I'm not going to scream it off the rooftops. I love picking up and delivering because it's just work. It just feels like work. But I recognize its importance in a lot of games, and how it works in an optimization setting I think is very interesting to me. Yeah, it's one I could go up or down with on any given day though, depending on the game, because I think its implementation and how it works with the other things that are going on that makes it really cook for me. That's why I like it in Istanbul, because it's mostly about this efficiency puzzle and the efficiency of the actions and tracing out your pathways, which I really do enjoy. Now, number 58 is a legacy game, the legacy game mechanic. And this is cool that it's made its way onto the Board Game Geek pages. We can thank Risk Legacy for that. Now it's a whole genre. I do love legacy games. I really do. The reason this is lower and not in my top 50 is because I'm sick of them as well. I am, and it's because of the investment that it requires to play them, and I think that's just based around my own particular game group. But the concept of legacy games is so good when you think about it, or at least when I think about it. I think it is. I love the concept that at the end of this game, you will have a game that is completely unique to you and unique to your experiences. And I think that's also where a lot of legacy games fall flat, is that they consider the journey and not the destination. And legacy games are usually about the journey and not the destination. But I want the destination. I want there to be a legacy game out there which I can take to a meetup, and I can have a friend or a friend group who brings their copy to a meetup, and we could play both of them in the same day because they feel so different. And I guess that's just variable setup, right? Like that could just be any game where you set things up variably. Oh, yes, there is a dangerous zone here, and there's a building that you can purchase things at over here. I think I'm just describing a variable setup of a game. But the idea that it is permanent, I think, has a lot of merit and adds to that experience of the evening. The act of tearing up cards is hurtful to me. It's legitimately hurtful. I believe it also is part of the legacy experience. I will never tear up the card. I will pass it off to my heathen friends who will do that work for me. I'd like to keep my hands clean of board game destruction. But I think even if you like it, if you don't like it, if you've played too much of them, if you can't get them to the table, I think you have to appreciate the level of sort of innovation to the genre, innovation to the board gaming space that like legacy games have provided. So that's why they're at my 58, just in the middle and forgettable. I should say, if you haven't tuned in, I've gone from 150 up until now, so this is in the top third, or almost in the top third when we get into 50. Next up in 57, we have the Move Through deck. That's what it's called, Move Through deck. Get out of here, deck, we're going right through you. This is the idea that you have a deck of cards, and in order to win the game, you gotta get through it. It's just like kissing your uncle. You just gotta get through it. That's what I've always been told. And I think the reason why this one is up so high is because one of my favorite games, Attack on Titan, the deck building game, has this as a mechanic in it. You are working your way through the deck, and harder villains are popping up along the way. Legendary Aliens has this as well. You have a set deck that you mix up beforehand, and then you have to deal with whatever comes your way. The other things that are listed on Board Game Geek in the top right now are Lost Ruins of Arnak, Time Stories, Ghost Stories, Other Stories, no, not that one, Imperium Classics. The Grizzled is the whole game is you got to get through this deck before this deck empties, or else you lose. If you get through this deck, you win. And what I do like about moving through a deck is the mystery of it. the randomization, you don't know what's going to come, the sense of progression that is developed as you move through this thing. You know there will be challenges. You can see the time ticking away as well. There are quite a few applications of moving through a deck if you're going to do it in a cooperative fashion or just as a time counter, really. And I think the variability of it is kind of fun. It's not the most innovative of mechanics, but you got a deck of cards, you got to figure out how you get through it, and you know there will be set markers, but you don't know where they will occur. I think that's interesting and provides a nice degree of randomization and variability that can keep people coming back. Number 56 is the connections mechanic. These are all as listed on Board Game Geek as well. So if you click under any game under the category, you can see, whoa, what are the mechanics in there? And then you can click on each one to get to what I'm talking about, or to see how they're categorized. And usually these are also categorized by the publisher, I should reiterate as well. So sometimes they'll miss them. Sometimes there'll be other little things that are a smaller aspect or were just forgotten about, or they just didn't know the terminology for it, which again is why I like doing this series. But connections is very simple. You are trying to get from point A to point B on the board. That's it. If you're on the underground, you want to connect to various places. It has Tigris and Euphrates, Age of Steam listed here, Ticket to Ride Europe, anything Ticket to Ride. Those are your connections. Ticket to Ride is the most standard example, I think, of these connection points. But I think when you look, and there's 332 games listed as having connections, you can see these sort of route building games, and not necessarily even route building games, because Tigris and Euphrates, you're not building routes, you're placing your own people down, and you're also creating connections from point A to point B through other pieces as well. It's different than Ticket to Ride, but there's something very satisfying and very simple about from point A to point B, and knowing at some point those two things will intersect, or having that be your goal and having multiple ways of achieving that goal. I think it is very satisfying. I think that is why Ticket to Ride has such longevity, has so many expansions, because essentially every game of Ticket to Ride, your goals are your connections. The things that you're doing around them are different, but your goals, your main things that you are focused on, are these connection points and how they intersect with one another. It's kind of funny that Board Game Geek references that this is a sort of specialized way of set collecting. Except you're not collecting sets, putting things in your hand, you're collecting sets of places on a board, of nodes on a board, because they don't have to be destinations. They could just be random spots, right? Ticket to Ride is the easiest application to mentally think about this, but when you go down the line and you see that there's stuff in Watergate, Rajas of the Ganges, Railways of the World, Tyrants of the Underdark, more Ticket to Ride, Carnegie, Nirashima Hex, probably Hive. No, Hive probably wouldn't. I take that back. Edit that part out. I just got excited, okay? I love connections. I just love connecting with you all. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, please and thank you. Seriously, it doesn't cost you anything, and it literally improves my life. So unless you hate me and are a bad person, you'll subscribe. Both of those are together as well. If you hate me, well, you are a bad person. That's probably not true. You're probably a good person. You will probably be on the right side of history. Blue Lagoon is another one that's listed here. You're connecting, you're from island to island. Each island, you're getting this one contiguous path, or you want to connect to all the various islands. I don't know, there's lots of ways to implement this, but it's a very simple idea of point A to point B, and sometimes point A to point B, point C to point B, point D to point B, point A to point D, with C watching in the corner. Next up, at number 55, we have end game bonuses. You get points at the end of the game if you did a certain thing. Integral to so many of the top games on Board Game Geek. Ark Nova, Terraforming Mars, Gaia Project, 3 out of the top 10 have endgame bonuses. That's actually less than I expected. Then you have Scythe, Castles of Burgundy, Concordia. Blech. Can't believe Concordia is that high, but that's another topic of discussion. I'm not a huge fan of Concordia. That's a separate video, but the brief of it is a separate video that I haven't made yet, and probably won't make, because it would involve me spending more than 2 plays with Concordia. But the brief of it is that the reason I don't like Concordia is actually tied in to its endgame bonuses. I don't like a game that is entirely endgame bonuses, and that is Concordia. You don't see any progression of your score throughout the game. It's entirely endgame bonuses. But I like a little bit of endgame bonuses, and that's probably why, if endgame bonuses was my favorite mechanic, I bet Concordia would be in my top. But that's an interesting discovery that I just figured out now. I knew that I didn't like Concordia because of that. You can't see the progression. That's why they have that intermediate scoring. That's why they have that beginning scoring. They say, hey, once everybody's picked up their cards once, score, and you can see where you're at. It's just so that people understand, oh wow, all these cards I'm collecting, these are the score. This is the end game bonuses. The board doesn't matter whatsoever. I need more cards. Let's have the game end that way and not with any of the other end game conditions. But I love an end game bonus because I love these sort of like personal objectives and things that you are communally fighting over. Yeah, I have the most wings, therefore I win Wingspan. I have achieved the research of the science in terraforming Mars, and I will get those points that I funded early. Anyway, that's enough about endgame bonuses, but I think also it's helpful to clarify in what level do you like these mechanics? Do you want it to be your whole game? Do you want it just to be a smidgen? For me, endgame bonuses, just a smidgen at 55. Now, number 54 is open drafting. And open drafting is different from closed drafting, which you haven't yet seen on this list. Open drafting means there is open information. Everyone can see the information of the stuff that is being picked. Closed drafting is you cannot see the information. I'm going to choose a thing and then maybe pass it to you, and then you'll see what's left, but you won't see what I picked. Drafting is fun in either case. You'll see closed drafting a little bit earlier on, but let's talk about the benefits of open drafting, which I still really do enjoy. You have open drafting in Arc Nova, according to Board Game Geek at least, Through the Ages, Dune Imperium, Seven Wonders Duel, Concordia, and Wingspan. And this is interesting to me because they're also tying in open drafting in a sense with card market. It doesn't have to just be cards that you're drafting. You can pick tiles, you can pick dice, you can pick resources. But anything with that card market, even Ticket to Ride would fall into this category because you have a selection that everybody has access to and everybody can see what you're taking. And that's important because if people see what you're taking, then they can create a strategy against it. There won't be those surprises. I mean, Ticket to Ride, it's a bit different because you can take cards off the top of the deck, but anything with open drafting and open drafting as the central mechanic or mechanism, players can plan for what is being seen. And you can see the lay of the land. You can see what your opponents will also have access to depending on what you don't take. And that's the exciting part to me about open drafting. It's that, yes, I am giving my opponent, and drafting in general, I'm giving my opponent access to these things, and they see me take this thing. And so that plays into a really interesting mental game of, all right, I know they have that in their hand now. How do I counteract it using the other elements of the game? Drafting is fun. Drafting is a great mechanism, and that's evidenced by both open and closed drafting making their way into the top 54 of my favorite mechanics of all time and the best board game mechanisms of all time. But I think it's neat. I associate drafting as that sort of closed drafting, but there's a lot of applications of open drafting in that card market style. And if you love a card market, well then look on Board Game Geek for open drafting games because that is sort of how they'll tie that in together as well. Now, number 53 is the zone of control, different from the zone of silence, which I was put into after witnessing that horrible thing and can't get out of because just a little thing, the witness protection program, don't worry about it. Zone of silence, don't have to worry. But zone of control is different. Basically, zone of control is in area control, how far out does my control reach? If I have a guy here, does it impact the areas around my person, and how does that influence people moving in or moving out? If I'm beside somebody and I move out, do they get an attack on me? That sort of thing. The concept of a zone of control is very interesting to me. And there's not many popular widespread games that include it. You have Scythe that includes it, Tyrants in the Underdark that includes it, according to Board Game Geek. And then you jump down to the thousands with a lot of war games. As BGG says, it's a very common mechanism in war games. And also talks about the different variations, like locking zone of control, where if they move in, they can't move out because they're held into combat by another player. I think the possibilities of just defining how units interact with each other on the board and paying attention to how units interact with each other on the board is an exciting thing. It's an exciting thing to think about. It's an exciting thing to talk about. And it makes the planning, it makes you kind of have to zoom out a little bit, because you don't just have to worry about one space, you actually have to worry about 7 spaces, all the 7 spaces surrounding your person if they're on a hex-based board, as, you know, the little picture is showing. And think about how that affects movement. I think using that as a basis for an area control game is very exciting to me. And I think how we see it implemented into Scythe, I'm trying to think of matters in Scythe. What matters in Scythe is you are controlling the resources in the location. You have to bring the resources with you, and if you get kicked out, the resources stay. And so there are like implications of moving into a space that aren't just defined by the units, but are actually defined by the space itself too. That maybe that's how it's implemented. Let me know in the comments if you can think of a different implementation of Zone of Control for Scythe, because there aren't too many instances of, oh, I'm next to you, I can't do something. It's more what you do when you move in and how you kick people out. But yeah, Zone of Control is one that I hadn't really heard of until doing my deep dive into this, and I'm glad, again, that I decided to do this series, because it's really sort of opened up the possibilities and the thinking of how we define movement and how we can map out movement and thinking about movement going forward in this area controls genre, which I quite enjoy. 2 more left in this video. Next up in 52, we have pattern building. And it's very simple. You have to move components into a specific pattern in order to get points. They reference Azul being one of the most easy ones to think about. In Azul, you have your pattern set out for you, but there are other games that are listed here for pattern building as well. Castles of Burgundy being one of the first ones, which is cool to me. You have your pattern set out, but you are putting things upon that pattern and building in that pattern and triggering things depending on what sections you complete. In Castles of Burgundy, every time you complete a little section, depending upon the round that you're in, you get a certain number of points. And so it's deciding how to build that pattern to maximize your points with the actions that you have available. Again, with Azul, Cascadia is listed here. The Isle of Cats is listed as well, because you're placing your polyominoes and trying to keep different groupings of cats together. Welcome to is especially listed. Welcome to the roll and write as you lay out the numbers of your houses in a certain way to maximize your points. I like pattern building. I like creating different patterns. I like creating shapes. I like optimizing those patterns as well. And I like a game that would create patterns. That old wallpaper, for example, is sort of tile laying and pattern building. It doesn't look that good, but you have a card and you're taking another card and you're putting them together and you're making a pattern, as kind of this image suggests as well. There's something satisfying of seeing the pattern start to be built out around you. I feel Sagrada, again, would fall into this category as you build things out with specific constraints and specific goals towards victory points. I like a little bit of framework in my game, sometimes. I like it about 52 much. That's a word, that makes sense. And then finally, number 51, just shy of the top 50, and I really like how this fell. If you don't know, I took all the mechanics on Board Game Geek and I put them into Pub Meeple and I ranked them for hours. It took me so long. And I cut a few out that were extraneous. Again, watch the rest of the series and you'll know. But I haven't changed the ranking. I haven't touched it. And this was probably over 6 months now, 9 months maybe, that I started this, or that I did this last. And so it's very satisfying to me that just shy of the top 50, we have in 51 cooperative games. I don't dislike cooperative games. They are in the top 100, but I like a competitive game more than a cooperative game. I like 50 other mechanisms more than a cooperative game. Cooperative games are obviously games that you are working together. You all win or lose the game together. It's not a team game as well. Cooperative game is all or nothing. And it's strange, my number 2 game of all time is a cooperative game. I like cooperative games, but I like being competitive, and I think in terms of core mechanics, having a game being cooperative isn't something that's going to excite me. I don't mind playing a cooperative game, and I think it has its merits, and I think it's very helpful if there's a difference of skill level between you and your primary gaming partner as well, and you can really help each other by playing cooperatively rather than just constantly steamrolling them over and over. I think it has a lot of merits, but it's not something that's ever going to get me excited. I'm not going to say, yeah, wow, I love co-op games. I'm going to say, yeah, co-op games are fine. Co-op games are good. It's about the game itself. It's about the differences and unique game design choices that are made within the style of game that really get me excited and want to dive in again and again and figure out how to exploit those and how they all mesh together and work together. And I think a cooperative game, that's a decision that is made pretty much at the very beginning of game design. Is this game competitive or is it cooperative? Some people don't make that decision. Some people then just make two versions and say, you choose which one is best, audience, and don't tell you either, and make you play test it until one eventually wins out over the other. But for the most part, I think that is a decision that is made at the very beginning of the design process. And for that, I am not as interested in it because there's not as many intricacies or different tweaks to the system. Yeah, you're working together or you're not. That's it. So that's why it's my number 51, and I'm happy that it hits that sort of milestone marker of being 51, just shy of 50, to really indicate that I'm a tough, hardcore gamer to all of you out there. So that's it. That's my 60 to 51. Stay tuned for more on this series. I'm going to try to do more in the upcoming weeks or days, depending on when I can get around to it. I do want to finish this out. I'll try to finish this out as much as possible, but things pop up and I then have to address them as well because this series, well, it's not good for views or YouTube, but I like it enough and I think it is hopefully a valuable resource to break down what is interesting about these mechanics, make you think about what is interesting, and perhaps shine a little bit of light on them. So if you see them again out there, you have some sort of reference point as to what the heck that they are. Because that's also something that I had to go through a lot of these, even Zone of Control. I was like, well, that's new. It's cool. But that sort of terminology and phrasing of it was new to me. So I'm sure it's not new to some of you geniuses out there who are much smarter than me. But for us normies, there's a couple new ones. And hopefully this series can exist as that. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. My name is Chris George, and this is embarrassing, but I don't have a catchphrase. I am upset, though, that covering a player in lotion and rolling around on the floor is not listed on Board Game Geek as a mechanic, and yet it seems to always be included in most games I play. So I'm gonna have to talk to somebody about that, but otherwise, you know, it's an okay series.